Good afternoon, friends, and welcome to today's live reading from Love Stories, Chapter 11, Chapter 11, Another Journey of Hope. While Bonson was saying his last goodbyes to Salia, Hope was holding little Al-Salah. Nira had not asked to go with Hope to rescue Alva. She knew that Hope would insist that she stay with little Al-Salah. He would need a guardian, just as Hope had, and Nira knew that this would be herself. She did not argue with Hope about the foolishness of this mission. Hope would make her own decisions now, and she had really never had much luck getting Hope to do what she wanted when someone in danger was involved, especially if that someone was Alva. "I have something for you," Nira said, as Hope put Al-Salah down in his cradle. She held up a small dagger in a sheath with ties at the top and bottom. "This is a secret weapon. You wear it on your arm above the elbow with the handle facing down. The sheath is designed so the dagger will not slip unless you pull it out, and the straps are designed to be comfortable on the arm. Much more comfortable for you than for me, because you actually have a little flesh on your arm to hold it up. Pull up your sleeve and I will put it on." "It's lovely," Hope said, pulling up her sleeve. "You think my sword won't be enough?" "We need to be realistic, Hope. You could be captured." "True," Hope said. "If you are about to be captured, the knife is to use on yourself. Pull it and plunge it into your own heart." "I won't do that," Hope replied. "There are worse things in this world than death, Hope," Nira said solemnly. "I realize that," Hope said. "But I am Hope Dene, wife of Alva Dene, daughter-in-law of Al-Salah Dene the 26th, and descendant of Divan the Great. I will not perish by my own hand. But I thank you for the gift, and I will take it. I'm sure it will prove useful. Don't worry about me, Nira. You have prepared me for this. I'm not afraid. I love you." "I love you too," Nira said with resignation. They said no more. Hope met Bonson and Pryor at the western edge of the camp. The three set off on foot toward the northwest side of the Camden Pass. After they had walked about an hour, they came to a clump of shrubs clustered against a wall of solid rock about the same height as Hope. "Here we are," Hope said. "I hope neither of you is afraid of small spaces." She pulled the shrubs aside and ducked into a small cave. Bonson had been inside this cave before. Alva had showed it to him on the way to one of their inspection journeys in the Camden Pass. "You better wait till we get the secret door open," she said to Pryor. "I don't think the three of us can fit in the cave together." "Not sure I can get through that opening anyway," Pryor said, eyeing the small cave door. "You can," Hope called out of the cave with a musical giggle. "Just barely." Bonson waited outside with Pryor until Hope had opened the secret door. When it was open, she called them to enter. Pryor was carrying a large pack that had everything they would need for the journey. He took it off, and Bonson carried it inside. Then Pryor had to get on his hands and knees and turn sideways to worm into the cave, but he was able to manage it. Once they had all entered the secret passageway, Hope shut the door with a secret lever. She began to glow to illuminate the passageway. "Alva's never far from her mind," Pryor remarked. Bonson nodded. About 150 pages in, they saw a passage that went left. Hope explained that this was the passage that had led to the chasm that had opened the day of their first battle with Dachmann. "But it won't go far now," she said. "Now the tunnel has collapsed and been filled in. Our path goes straight back, under the mountains." "I never did care much for tight spaces," Pryor said, "but anything for Alva. I just hope all the tunnels are good and wide." The roof gets higher as we move further in, Hope explained. Give or take a few natural doorways into inner chambers, there aren't many tight squeezes. Have you been through? Pryor asked. No, but Alva's father gave him a map that he showed me. I memorized it. You mean you looked at it one time, Bonson said. Yes, Hope answered as her glow went slightly pink. I have a copy of that with me as well, Bonson said. I was supposed to memorize it, but I hadn't yet. Good thing you did in case the map gets lost. As they continued westward, the tunnel got colder and they had to put on cloaks. For many whiles, they were walking through a carved tunnel. There was plenty of space. It was clearly designed for a large group of people to travel through. 12 men could have walked abreast. And in most places, Pryor had plenty of headroom. Hope only occasionally had to warn him not to bump his head. The walls were of dull, gray rock. Periodically they would pass through a natural chamber in the rocks and make their way to a tunnel door at the far side. In these chambers they often encountered stalagmites and stalactites, some of which had connected to make pillars that looked like hourglasses. On they walked for hours and hours. At times they passed through caverns where the walls glimmered and twinkled. Hope explained that the rock was filled with ore and minerals. Any diamonds? Pryor asked. Not likely, Hope said. Not in these mountains. Eventually their small tunnel came into what looked like a vast chamber. Hope brightened her glow so they could see that it stretched for miles. How do we know the right way? Pryor asked. There are markers if you know how to spot them, Hope said. The map explained it. See that rock formation on the left? That's the first one. With all the trouble someone made to make this passageway, Pryor said, you'd think they could just carve arrows in the floor pointing the right way, or put up signs. Alva's ancestors were concerned what would happen if the opening on the other side was discovered by Huron, Hope explained. They didn't want to make it easy to get into Lassania by following the arrows backward. Thought of everything, didn't they? Yes. After a while, they began to encounter pools of water that were fed by subterranean channels as well as some streams. The pools and streams had many fish, none of which had eyes. How about that? Pryor said. Blind fish. Well, it's usually pitch dark in here, Bonson said. So what would they need eyes for? I just hope for their sakes they never make their way into the sun. They'd be easy prey. Fish living in darkness can cease to produce eyes within a few generations, Hope said conversationally. If they move into the light, their offspring will have eyes again in a few more generations. How do you know that? Pryor asked. I read it in a book once. Animals and fish change and adapt very quickly to meet the needs of their environment. That's why there are so many kinds of dogs or cats. You guys understand that? It's like fighting. How's that? Pryor asked. Because we adapt to meet the opponent's tactics. Makes sense, Bonson said. Yeah, except we don't grow eyes on the back of our heads, Pryor said. You think we're going to run into any monsters in here? Monsters? Bonson asked. Yeah, the kind that lurk in caves, like fire-breathing dragons, bat creatures, or giant eels. Hope laughed musically, and Bonson said, Those things aren't real. I know they aren't supposed to be, Pryor said, but neither is Hope. I mean, neither are the luminaries. Well, I suppose anything is possible, Hope said cheerily. We can always hope so. Hope so? Pryor asked. Of course, Hope replied. Some men may hate me, but I've never met a creature of any kind that didn't love me. They don't have dark hearts the way men do. Oh, I'd love a pet dragon, she said with a sigh. I'd sing him a song and we could ride him. If the opening on the other side was big enough, we could use his help. But if there are any dragons, I don't think they live in our part of the world. Terrible pity, Pryor said sardonically. Hope was able to recognize every marker in the vast cavern easily, so they were able to move swiftly. As they went on, the air began to feel more and more damp. After a few more hours, the roof began to slant downwards, and they could see that it looked to meet the ground in the distance. When they got closer, they saw that it did not go all the way to the ground, but ended at a rock wall about an average man's height. There was an opening in the wall, and they were headed straight for it. Hope had followed the path perfectly. As they approached, they heard the noise of rushing water that grew louder and louder. "What's that?" Pryor asked. The Delena River is actually fed by an underground river that runs under these mountains, Bonson said. It is actually fed by the Christora River in Huron, though most Lasonians don't know that. They think it just springs out of the ground. We have to cross the underground river at some point. We are probably close. Right, Hope? Yes. The river runs through just behind that wall. It runs through a tunnel, but there is a walking space on a ledge on either side, and there is a bridge crossing it. In a short time, they arrived at the opening and entered the tunnel. The river was about a length of 20 men across. It was rushing very fast, about a forearm's length below the ledges. "It must be very deep here," Hope said, looking at the dark water with love in her eyes. "Otherwise it couldn't be so narrow. It's beautiful, isn't it?" "If you say so," said Pryor. "Well, when we're done admiring it," Bonson said, "we have a problem." He inclined his head to the right, and they saw the remains of a bridge entry on the right side of the river. Then they looked across and saw the remains on the other side, but there was no bridge connecting them. "Uh-oh," Hope said. "Do you think the Dochmonians found the other entrance and dismantled it?" Bonson asked. "No, it was me," Hope said. Both of her companions jerked toward her in confused disbelief. "Not on purpose," Hope said. "Remember the day I made it rain?" She said this with a blush. "Yes," both men said in unison. "Well, I guess it rained on the other side of the mountains, too. Most of the water would have made its way into the Christora River Bonson mentioned. It would have swelled and poured into the entrance of this river below the mountains. When a lot of water is funneled through a tighter space, it starts moving very fast. I'll bet this tunnel filled up to the top and ripped through that bridge. I didn't mean to make that happen." "Well," Pryor said with a laugh, "the next time the Dochmanim are lighting us all on fire, make sure you only make it rain on our side of the mountains." "Thanks for not blaming me," Hope said, "but we still need to figure out what to do." "We can swim it," Bonson said. "The water's moving way too fast, Bonson." "Apparently, you've never heard of the incredible swimming exploits of the Pride of the Twin Kingdoms," Bonson said with a smile. "Bonson," Hope said seriously, "I'm sure you are the best swimmer in the world, but no one could swim that. It'll sweep you away. You see how fast it's moving at the top? It'll be going even faster below." "You may be right," Bonson said, "but Alva may be being tortured as we speak. I can just see him smiling at the Dochmanim while they cut off his toes one by one. We gotta try something. Pryor, we have a rope in the pack, right?" "Yes." "Well, we'll tie it around my waist. That way I can tie it to the other side and you two can climb across. But if I do get swept away, Pryor the Mighty can pull me out of the water." "And if you both get pulled in?" Hope asked. "Then you'll need to think of a plan B," Bonson said. "I don't like it," Hope said. "But the minutes are precious," Bonson replied. "We can't go back for the equipment to build a bridge." "Sounds fishy," Pryor said. "No pun intended. Boy, I miss Keel. But if anyone can do it, you can." Hope continued to look thoughtful as Pryor began to rummage in the pack for the rope. Taking the rope from the pack, he uncoiled enough to reach the other side of the river and tied the rope securely to his own waist. He then tied the end of the rope around Bonsan's waist. Hope continued to look thoughtful and concerned. "Well," Bonsan said, "no point in prolonging the inevitable." Pryor took a secure stance, with his weight on his right leg, and wedged his left foot securely against the edge of a depression in the stone floor. "Bottoms up," Bonsan said, and dived into the water. Immediately the rope was pulled tight with a hard jerk as Bonsan was pulled under the water. The force of the jerk nearly caused Pryor to lose his footing. Had he not had his front foot secure, he would have slid in after his friend. With immense strength and loud groans, he began to pull back the rope hand over hand. Hope joined him and did what she could to pull the loose part of the rope behind him. Whether she made any discernible difference would have been hard to say, but inch by inch, Pryor was able to pull the rope back until, finally, Bonsan's lifeless body reappeared. Such was the force of Pryor's pulling that Bonsan's body popped out of the water, and Pryor fell over backward with the smaller man landing on top of him. Pryor grabbed his left wrist. "He still has a pulse," he said, and laying him on his back, he said, "Hope, I assume you know how to resuscitate a man. I'll pump, you breathe." "I'm glad you know how to do that," Hope said, "but it won't be necessary, and you could break the ribs in his chest by accident." Hope put both of her hands in the center of Bonsan's chest. Her hands glowed brightly and the glow began to emanate from Bonsan's body. The water began to come out of his mouth, and he suddenly woke with a sputter and a cough. He sat up, turned over on his hands and knees, and coughed out the last remains of the water. Through gasping breaths, he said, "That was a really bad idea." He was shivering violently from the cold, so Hope began to sing a song about a warm fireplace in the wintertime, and soon the three of them felt comfortably warm. "I think I've got it," Hope said once Bonsan seemed recovered. "It came to me right as Bonsan was diving in, but it was too late to tell him to stop." "I can't wait," Pryor said. "Well," Hope began, "in the rare times when Hillel would visit when I was a little girl, I used to get him to help me pretend to fly. He would grab one of my arms and one of my legs and swing me around head first until he got dizzy." "Sounds like fun," Bonsan said, "but are you thinking you can fly?" "I'd believe it. Just fly on solid ground first for a tester. We don't want you falling in that water." "No, I can't fly. Not on my own, anyway. But I think that if Pryor spins me around like Hillel did, and then lets go at the right time, he could throw me across the river. Then you guys can find a rock and tie the rope at the end of it and throw it across. We'll tie it to the remaining foundations of the bridge, and you guys can climb across just like we said before." "And if he throws you that hard and that far," Bonsan asked, "how are you going to land without getting hurt?" "I'm the daughter-in-law of Al-Salah Dene," Hope replied with a smile. Both Pryor and Bonsan laughed. "But he does have a point," Pryor said, "and when I'm getting dizzy spinning, how will I be sure to throw you in exactly the right direction?" "As to throwing me in the right direction, you'll have to let go exactly when I tell you. As to how I'll land safely, let me worry about that." Hope looked down at the skirt of her dress. It reached almost to her ankles. She looked thoughtful for a moment, then reached down, grabbed the skirt, and pulled it up between her legs, taking an end in each hand, and tied the two ends tightly around her back. This exposed her legs to mid-thigh, while the skirt was bunched up around her hips. With her short, slightly plump frame, she looked rather like a baby in a diaper. "Don't you dare laugh at me," she said. Pryor and Bonsan were clearly struggling to keep straight faces. They held their breath together for a few seconds while Hope gave them an annoyed look. Then all three burst into laughter. Once their laughter had subsided, Pryor did as Hope asked. He grabbed her left arm and leg and began to spin her around head first. On the 6th time around, Hope yelled, "Now!" Pryor flung her with all his might across the river. As Hope sailed through the air head first, she put her arms at her sides and quickly observed the other side of the river, which was fast approaching. The floor was wet, and she would land close to the wall opposite. Right before the moment of impact, she lowered her head and went directly into a roll. She came up on her feet, ran forward 2 steps on the ground, and then ran up 5 steps on the wall. She did a backflip, landing on her feet and facing the wall. Panting and glowing, she turned to look at the men on the opposite side, looking decidedly pleased with herself. "Now that's impressive," Pryor said. "It's pretty impressive to throw a woman that far, too," Bonson said. "Always came in handy when I wanted to get rid of 'em," Pryor said with a slight wink. "Ha, ha, ha," Hope said sarcastically from across the river. "I heard that. At least I read your lips." "Wow," Bonson said. "She can read our lips from there." "Well, then I guess I better not say she looks like an overgrown baby in a loaded diaper," Pryor said. Both men laughed. Hope wanted to say something clever in response, but she couldn't think of a name that didn't seem too mean. What came out was, "Oh, you're big." Just before she was about to say oafs, Pryor said, "Well, how about that, brother? We're big." "Well, we are," Bonson replied. "Especially you." "You guys are so funny," Hope said sarcastically. "Now how about getting me that rope?" "I figured we'd head back now," Pryor replied. "What do you need us for?" "Yeah, because I can throw myself across rivers." Pryor tied the rope to a large rock and threw it across. Rather than trying to catch it, Hope let it land, then sprung on the rope. She tied one end to the foundation of the former bridge on her side and let Pryor tie the other side on the other. Then Bonson clambered across. The pack was on his pack. The pack Pryor had been carrying was on Bonson's back to lessen Pryor's weight. After Bonson, Pryor followed. In the middle, he nearly dipped in the water, but he made it. Once they were safely on the other side, they decided to take a rest and have a meal before continuing. As they were finishing up eating, Bonson looked at Pryor seriously. "Pryor," he said, "I have something to tell you. It might hurt, but it's better to hear it from a friend." "Shoot," Pryor said. "You're big." The men roared. "Oh, great," Hope said. "Now you guys are going to be saying that for the rest of my life." "Yep," they said in unison. Suddenly Hope's face assumed a distant, mesmerized look. "What is it?" Bonson asked. "It's Alva,"